Okay, so we are trying to figure out what I did wrong here that I'm getting this error. And after stepping back from video making and looking at this logically, it was pretty easy to figure out. The button that we're programming shows up in frame 2. I was writing the actions back to frame 1. So the action has to occur where the buttons occur, right? So on frame 1 we have all these buttons and we wrote all the actions on frame 1. Well, we need to write the action for this button on frame 2, which just simply means I need to click up here in the actions layer, frame 2, do an F7, and that's where my code needs to go. Now I'm going to just go through this like how you would do it if you had no idea what to write. So I'm going to go into actions, click over to bring me to back to frame 1 right there, and then I'm going to just cut or actually just get rid of everything that I did here. So I'll just swipe across here. You'll see that the code that I wrote is correct in here, but we'll use code snippets to get us here. So let's delete that, and then we will make sure that the button that we're trying to write to is selected, that we're on frame 2, and then we'll go into window, and instead of actions we'll go into code snippets. We're doing action script, timeline navigation, and what we want is to click to go to a frame and stop. So we'll double click that. It opens us up into frame number 2 in the actions panel, and then they just randomly put a frame to stop at in there, and we'll change that to 1 because that's the frame that we want to stop on. So now if we preview this, we can see that no error popped up here, and we can also see that if we go ahead and play this right from the beginning, that this button indeed does its job. And if we let it play out for a long time, it works fine. However, if I click here using the buttons and jump forward, it doesn't work. Now this took a bit of thinking to figure out what it is, and I guess just in all the projects I've done, I've never had a button that only appeared in the second frame, or any between frames, that was jumped over, because that's exactly what's happening. Is if the movie just plays through, it goes past frame 2 and the program has a chance to read that code. However, if we're on frame 1 and we say jump to easing, masking, anything else, the timeline essentially hops over and jumps, and so it doesn't get a chance to read this. So what we have to do here is a fix. Might seem a little bit bizarre. In fact, let me just clean something up real quick. I'm just going to rename this layer to menu. Then I'm going to make another layer right above that, and I'll call that menu BTN, and I'll just drag this button up and over so that it lands in that first frame. And then I'm going to take the code that I wrote in that second frame, and I'm going to move it over to the first frame. And notice we can navigate right inside of here to our different frames that have actions on. So I'll click back on frame 1, come down here, Command V, paste that code in. And then the menu should only show up for one frame, so let's click there, put in our F7, and now if we preview the movie, the problem that we have now is that this bar shows up in the first frame, which is not great, but at least it works. It works right from the very beginning. It works if we jump to something. So how do we fix that so that we can make it invisible in the first frame? Now I tried masking, and masking doesn't work. For some reason, if it masks the button out, the code ignores it. So Next step would be, well, what if we turn the opacity down in this frame and have a copy of it here? And actually that works. The reason I was thinking it might not work is because now you have a whole new instance of the button here, the menu button. And if you did an F7 here, drug out another instance from the library, it wouldn't work as easy as it does here at least. So if I just click right there, do an F6, we now have another copy of that button. If we were to preview it in with the command return, we would see that it works. So the only thing we have to take care of here is going back to the first frame. We just have to select the instance of the button there and go into color effects, style, and take the alpha down to 0. Now the reason that this does work this way is we can see that the properties, the instance has a name, and when we do the F6, click on it, we can see that the instance name carried over. So it's not like the code has a problem with it. So technically there's nothing written here. And so I just went in there for frame 2 in the actions and just deleted everything that was in there, which was just that code hinting that was telling us what the button was about to do. And then with that gone, the little A goes away, so it just makes the everything a little bit easier to read. If we're troubleshooting, we know that there's only action there and then some actions down later. And now everything works fine. So that's just something you got to remember, is that your program needs to read the code. You know, in other words, the playhead, if you will, needs to go past the code it needs. Another way that we could have fixed this would have been to left the action here, and then every time we went to a potential place where it would jump to, like right here, we'd have to put in another instance of the menu button and then reprogram it in the code. So obviously this solution that we did was much quicker and easier, and definitely would be the recommended way to go for troubleshooting and working in a group of other programmers or designers, which is quite common in the workplace, that 3 people would be working on a project together. So you got to come up with some things where you're not making it hard for the other people to figure out what you've done in case they need to make a change. Let's knock out another question here. It helps to be a good blank when digitally animating. I think this is on the very first quiz that I gave you, and the answer is troubleshooter. Now you might think, well, I don't possess that skill. Sure, maybe some people are better at fixing things than others. However, keep in mind, at any time you can go up here, you can do a file, save, and then a file save as, and call out a version with troubleshooting in the title. In fact, I had my work in progress that I was working on, in addition to all the different versions that I made along the way, version 2, version 3, version 4. And if I was a beginner, I'd probably have 15 different versions there, because I'd be more paranoid that something's going to go wrong. But at any time, you can save off another version and just try things until you finally figure out what's wrong. And don't forget about resources, like just going to Google and searching for the problem that you're having. Don't always assume that it's the program, because most of the time it's not. You know, as I just saw fixing that button, you know, when I thought about it logically, it made sense. And sometimes you got to get away. You know, if you sit here for 4 hours and try to troubleshoot and you're not getting anywhere, take a break. Sleep on it overnight. That's why it always helps to start your projects and your assignments as early as you can. Now we're almost finished with this, and let's just pretend for a minute that this was a project for a client. What we want to do here is decide, okay, is this ready? Go through, run it a couple more times, test everything. And let's say that we've learned a few things along the way that we want to mark out for future use. There would be absolutely nothing wrong with creating another layer here and calling it notes. And then just along the way doing an F7 here or there, bringing out the text thing and say note here, you know, this is what I learned. And then, you know, go ahead, save that out. Save as, and you know, maybe add to it. I guess for me now this would be version 5, and then you know, indicate that it has notes. invisible button, so on. And then that's the one that you would go to in the future when you're working with another client and you have something similar. So go ahead, close that one down, but now go back to the one that is for your client, or in our case, for you to turn in, and do this. Save a copy of your animation with any notes, troubleshooting, buttons, and codes. However, the client version should be ultra clean. So we want to make sure there's nothing in here that could cause a problem. So one of the things we did was on this first area, we put an invisible button. And in fact, we might even go as far as to go to the library and just get rid of that, because it is one more thing that has to get rendered and will take up more file space, and potentially if you're working for web, one more thing that has to load when the page loads up. So let's get rid of all that stuff. We also wrote some code for that button on the first frame. In fact, right now, if we tested this, we would get an error, and that error would say it's trying to find something. Where is this? And then, luckily when you give stuff intuitive names, you're like, ah, yes, that's right. The invisible button has come back to haunt me. So we just simply go into our actions, find the invisible button, code, and delete it. Getting rid of all this stuff just makes everything nice and easy for anyone who might have to work on it later. So now we should be able to come back, do our final test on here. Oh, still something. What was that? Yeah, I see what I did. Too busy talking, not paying attention. I thought that I had selected invisible button and deleted it, and actuality what I did was deleted my newest button, which was the menu button. So I will now delete that, which was the invisible button, and then reprogram my menu button. Okay, and so that's what the code should look like now. And in fact, let me just do, I mean, we're basically done, but if you're having any problems at all, what I'm going to do is just make available every section of this to you. So what I'll do is I'll show you the, just kind of, move this a little bit, and you can hit the pause button anytime that you need to. I'll show you all of the code, and then I'll just scrub through my timeline so that you can kind of compare and contrast your animation to mine. So that was the actions in frame 1, the actions in frame 190, or I don't care that your frames are exactly the same numbers as mine, but the frame towards the end is just simply a stop. And then let me go ahead and show you everything that's in here. This is with both of my folders open, and let me go all the way back to the beginning. And what I'll do here is I'll just hold down the period key and just step through this. But if you're good, if you got everything, your Swift file looks like my Swift file, or at least contains all the things on the grade sheet, you're good. So we'll see you in the next project.